Greetings, everyone. Peace and blessings be unto you. As you notice, I am usually Minister Jamie Eatman, but I'm Jamie Eatman on the rise at the moment. I wanted to take this opportunity to do something geared toward Martin Luther King's, I guess, birthday. I don't really not doing this because it's birthday. I'm doing this because of this time and my respect for him, and more importantly, for what he stood for. So I do hope that you will be blessed by something that's going to be said, and something be said that'll be provoking enough to you to really give some thought to what's being said, and maybe what did I intended to say. Hopefully it'll come across with clarity, but if it not, it'll at least give you something to ponder. And again, I am Jamie Eatman, and I'm going to begin with a little story as it pertains to a poem I wrote. And I'm going to share this poem with you. But prior to sharing the poem with you, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why it was written. I like writing poetry, and I was in this city of Augusta, and I was working with some youth, and I asked them to write a poem. I was waiting; their parents were going to come pick them up, and as they were writing their poem, I started a poem of my own. And as I started this poem, it eventually got to the point where the last person left, and I just went back to read over what I had written. And as I read the poem, I didn't finish it for two reasons. One, the poem, in my opinion, it was more profound than I would think that I would want to take credit for. At that point in my life, I wasn't where I am now. So I had some reservations about that. And the second reason was, well, when I read you the poem, you'll see what I mean. But it was something that I thought wouldn't be appropriate because I have the utmost respect for Dr. Martin Luther King. And having the utmost respect for him, I wouldn't ever want to do anything that would come across as being insulting to him, or someone would assume that I was trying to exalt myself above my respect for him. But the title of what I'm doing now is Envision the Dream. And let me tell you all a little bit about that title so you understand what that means. You know, when we think of Dr. King, a man as great as he was, some people look at him in various ways. Some see him as being a prophet. As a matter of fact, I watched a program today when they referred to him as a modern day prophet. So when I hear terms like that, but yet he's known for being a dreamer. When you hear the term dreamer, I don't care how you do it. It actually limits one's thought. And I know he used the term himself, but because he used the term, it isn't something that we have to keep on repeating. At least I don't feel I have to anyway, because there's a revelation behind it, and is that spirit of what the message was, what I got from his life, and what it inspired in me that I want to share with you all, and maybe it'll be an inspiration to someone else. But let me go back to that poem that I wrote for a moment. When I wrote that poem, I put it in a drawer, never to be found again, or it didn't really matter because as far as I was concerned, I was done with it. But as I went on with life, there was a couple things that happened. One was surrounded Mandela, and when Mandela gave a speech, he read a poem, and the poem he read was one that it was truly inspiring. There's some things you're going to go through in life that are going to equip you to go through some additional things. For example, Dr. King's life. When you look at his life and how he got started and all the different things that he had done, and to the point where he was at a point where he gave his speech where he said that he wasn't fearing any man. He didn't start out not fearing any man. But when he got to that point, it was a result of all the things that he had accomplished. And today, life is like that. Going back to this poem, when I wrote it, I wasn't able to actually take credit for what I was writing, even though I had written it. It wasn't a matter of the person that wrote it. It was standing behind those words, because you have to be at a point in your life where whatever you believe in, you have to stand behind it. As a matter of fact, Dr. King uh, used this phrase. He said, if a man hadn't found something for which he's willing to die, he isn't fit to live. I may have that phrase a little incorrect, but in essence, that's basically what he was saying. And at that time, I wasn't willing to stand behind that. It wasn't a matter of life or death. It was just a matter of I wasn't ready to stand behind that. That was bigger than I am. But when I read this poem by Nelson Mandela, and I'm going to share this poem with you right now. And as we move forward, I don't want you to remember Dr. King's birthday. I want you to remember the spirit of Dr. King. So the poem that I read was Our Deepest Fear. And it reads, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is not our light. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We must ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, or fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our present automatically liberates others. And I shared this poem with you so I could finish telling you the story about the poem I wrote. When I wrote that poem, it said some things that, that seemed contrary to what I was attempting to communicate. So it was a light in a sense, but I was not willing to let that light shine. But then I realized in reading this poem, it's not my inadequacies that was in question. It was a matter of greatness. And I was shrinking. I shrunk within myself. And when I think about what Dr. King stood for and the occasion that he had to rise to, it had nothing to do with shrinking. So as I read this and I meditated on the word, I eventually got to the point where I was able to share that poem. But before I get to that poem, I want to tell you all about why Envision the Dream. Today, I watched a program concerning Dr. King and the King Center, and there was quite a few people that spoke. There were some political people that spoke. There were some people from various races that spoke. I mean, some powerful things were said. But having lived as long as I have and attended a few programs in the past, I know how we do on holidays. I know how we do on celebrations. We pull together our most vocal people, and they do just what they were brought together to do. They deliver great speeches. But it's rare to see a lot come from those type speeches. And when I look at the King Center, and if you think about it, I when I moved to Atlanta, I saw a house that was once, I guess it was a museum or something that surrounded the King, Dr. King. But then there was this big, large building. So I doubt if very many people go to the house if the house is still open. I did get to see it before it closed. But now it's one of those things, where it's like the Bible, to be honest with you. If you think about the Bible and what it stands for, everybody want to preach it, but it wasn't designed solely to be preached. It was designed as something to motivate, to inspire people that would move forward with that word, that would take it and accomplish something. that would serve the people. And I believe that Dr. King's life and his message was the exact same way. So when we come together on his birthday, Black History Month, and we do the and say these things, and somehow we don't follow up or we allow them to fall by the wayside, I think we're doing an injustice. So I wanted to do something. It was in my spirit. I just couldn't sit back because I would feel very hypocritical of if I did that, because Dr. King is one of the biggest motivators of and in my life. So I couldn't just sit back and be critical of what someone else had done without doing anything myself. So that is where I wanted to start with this. It's very important that we understand and kind of see who Dr. King is and was. When we look in the Bible, there's an analogy that's very important. When we think about some of the things that Jesus taught, Jesus made reference to the dead and a word that he had being life. And I go back to that quote: if a man hadn't found something for which he's willing to die, he isn't fit to live. When I look at the things that he spoke and he taught, collectively, they inspire me to great heights, and combine them with my um, biblical beliefs and the things I've learned from him and the things that I feel that I'm supposed to be doing in life. It's it's motivating. So it can't just be a dream, not for me. It can't just be a dream, not for the people. It can't just be a dream, not even for him, because he did state that I may not get there with you. So if it's left as a dream, who carries out a dream? God gives us visions. So we have to envision the dream. I think Dr. King knew, just as Jesus did, that he hadn't done it all. There was more to be done, and there would be somebody to do it. Those other people, and that's why it's important that we carry a vision versus a dream. When he said, I have a dream today, for whatever reason he chose, that it might have been an actual dream. But as he spoke those prophetic words about it coming to pass, he was referring to something that will be brought to pass by those that followed him. He specifically said, I may not get there with you. There was a message he gave about time, and he went to all these places, and he said that he'd want to live just a little bit in this century. And he did just that. He brought it all the way up to the movement at that point. And here we are today. Here I am. I would probably want to trace those steps. I'd want to follow him through all that point in time. And I'd want to see this day and time and wish that he could. Well, I wouldn't wish that he could see it, because I think it should be so much more that's representative of this day and time. But the fact that it's not isn't a reflection on him. It's kind of a reflection on us. So as I looked at that comment about when Jesus made reference to let the dead bury the dead, there's some things that he wanted to empower those that came after him with. And there's some things that we need to be empowered with today. And if we're going to be empowered with those things and by those things, we need to know who it is that we are following. You know, Jesus asked his disciples a question. He said, whom do men say that I am? And if Dr. King had asked that question, he'd ask it of us. Whom do men say that I am? And some would say, you're a dreamer. Some would say you're the leader that led all these movements. Some would say you were a Nobel Peace Prize winner. But then he'd probably do something just as Jesus did and ask the question, whom do you say that I am? Because that's what really matters. It doesn't matter what the speaker said at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how great and empowering the message was. It's like the word. What matters is what you get, and all that understand, and all that get an understanding. That's the portion that really matters. So when Jesus went through that with his disciples and he asked that question, but whom do you say that I am? And there was a Peter that was among those that gave an answer. He said that thou art the Christ. Going back to what I said earlier, people would say all these different things about who they may see Dr. King as being, but the only real representation of Dr. King that really matters is the one that you have. And I'm going to share my representation of him, or what he meant to me, with you, and hope that you'll be as inspired by him as I was. As I was coming up and as a young man and joined the military, and I heard some of his speeches, and I was moved by them. As a matter of fact, it was by him, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, um, Frederick Douglass. I mean, I just became absorbed with the Black history. And when I saw and learned what we as a people have went through, something that Black History Month doesn't fully give us. It gives us heroes, but it doesn't really give us a history. In our schools today, there's a problem with giving that history. And without that history, it's unfortunate we're going to be missing something. It's like the dream minus the vision. If you don't act on the dream, what do you have? If you don't truly know the history, what do you have? You have a book here with a well-defined story. It has to be relevant. And as I began to live my life, Dr. King was very relevant. But if I go back to the poem that I wrote, that poem was greater than I was. That poem was one I couldn't share. It actually was something that I was keeping from the world. It was like my light that I had just put in a drawer, and I was going to leave it there. But after I read that poem I shared with you all earlier about our deepest fear, I was no longer afraid. But I forgot about that poem. And one day I stumbled across it. So it was a poem that was written in 2 points in time, 2 points in my life. One was by, I would have to say, a more fearful individual, and the other was by a wiser and more courageous man. So it was like two people that wrote that, but it became this one poem that today, without this story, a person might not ever know that it was two poems. Well, if we look at what Dr. King did in life, if you look at history before the civil rights movement and the accomplishments that were made, we find people that were there and some accomplishments. But if we look at what preceded him and what he was able to accomplish, the people that don't know the history, they wouldn't know the difference. But there's a time that preceded him, which makes his accomplishments as great as they are. How great are they? Well, that depends on who you ask. If you ask your grandmother or our grandmothers or our mothers, they will have a different story than we do. And if you ask our children, their stories will differ as well. And the reason those stories differ is because there's something about this vision that he had that's being left or lost in the so-called dream. It's time we envision the dream, that we bring some reality to it, because it's only then, by envisioning the dream, does it become relevant. Does it become pertinent? Does it inspire and motivate, as I know that it has the potential to do, because it has done so in my life? And I pray that if you're watching this, that somehow it has some motivating factor in your life. But as I move on from that point there, it's, if you think about Jesus and the disciples, and the Bible says that when the shepherd is smitten, the sheep will scatter. There came a point where they scattered, but then there came a point of empowerment. And here we are today as a people. Believe it or not, we're people of God. And Martin Luther King was just one another person of God, another child of God. So just as he had something to do, we have something to do as well. Some of us that wouldn't make any sense. You'd probably say, "Who the hell does he think he is?" But there's somebody else that's hearing this that's going to know exactly what I'm talking about, because it's going to be like an alarm that's going to remind them. You might be one of those people. If you're not, don't worry about it. The day is going to come when there'll be something going on, and you'll just have to decide if you're going to be a part of the problem or a part of the solution. And that's a decision that at this moment may not even seem important, a statement that you may even forget. But there's a couple of quotes as I listened to the conversation today. There was some youth that did a song. And I think every quote I ever used of Dr. King, they had in that song. It sounded great. But when we go and place things in songs and we make it just lyrical, it's just a lyric, folklore or something of that nature. Somehow it uh, has a tendency to lose its power. But I pray that's not the case with those words, because even as they was presenting this song, they communicated a great message, but they was much more meaningful to me because I had heard them before. And I wanted to go ahead and I'm going to share the poem with you if I can get my hands on it again. Lady Antoinette, can you get me a book, please? And as I share this poem with you, I pray that you're going to be blessed by it. My computer says my battery is low. Can 1 second, please? Okay, this poem. Can you check that, please? This poem is called "Awakening the Dreamer," and notice the word "awakening the dreamer," because as people have shared with us and chose to make this a dream, they are actually attempting to make it a dream as far as our views and who we are and the way we see it as well. But let's not fall asleep. It's interesting or ironic that Jesus' followers, when he asked them to watch and pray, that they went to sleep. And we don't want to be asleep today. We want to wake up. So the title of this poem was Awakening the Dreamer. And as I wrote this poem, I'm with you now. And the reason I want to share it with you isn't so much that I want to take um, credit for writing this poem. I would have to take that. This isn't an unknown poem, but it isn't so much the poem as it is the significance of it. It's like I just told you about Dr. King. The only reason I got on here wasn't because I had anything to say other than what was said, but it was because the manner in which we place a word something has a lot to do with the manner in which it would be remembered. And the manner in which it would be remembered has everything to do with the impact that it's going to make in our lives. Dr. King for me was truly a motivation. You know, as I read his work, I read the books, a couple of them, and as I read them, the words began to kind of take root in my life. And as you can see today, the fact that I'm on here, it isn't because I just love Facebook. There's a lot of things that I don't do Facebook concerning because of the people. I don't want to appear to be attention seeking. But there's some things that's valuable to us. There's some things we have that if we don't know the value of them, we could easily push them aside. We could easily allow them to go unnoticed. So for that reason, I wanted to share and come and share this moment with you. Can you find that for me, please? Awaken the Dreamer. But this day It's Dr. King's birthday, and it's the day that a lot is put into, a lot is said, and making people aware of who he was. So when we look at who he was, the only way that his mission or his I call it a vision, as you'll see in a moment, can continue and be effective in our lives is that we keep it alive. One of the things that truly was inspirational for me during that time frame, there was a series of tapes, and I would encourage you all, if you haven't seen them, to go to YouTube. I think you'll be able to find them. But they were called Keep Your Eye on the Prize. And as I watched that series, it it gave me an education, something that we are truly missing. And it went up and it covered a time frame. And I watched those. I watched them. I listened to the music, and the music and the way it was done was very dramatic. But as I went back and read and I listened to Dr. King, so as I saw those images and I heard those words and I took what he said and I began to see myself a little bit differently, it made me feel a little bit of what I would call a motivational dissatisfaction or inspirational dissatisfaction. I became dissatisfied with some things because if you don't know better, you can't do better. And a quote that he used was, "He who gets behind in a race must forever remain behind or run faster than the man in front." And that stayed with me because in the military, we ran around a track. It was an oval or circular track. And people that actually were faster could actually lap you like 3 or 4 times. And when they were resting, while you still be trying to run, they'd be able to talk to you and they'd still be 3 laps ahead of you. And if you didn't know that you were in that race, or you didn't know what was going on, you would remain behind. And if you knew that you were behind, then it would inspire you to run faster. It would inspire you not to focus on where you are, but where you're going or where you need to be. And I'm about to share this poem with you. And this poem says everything I'm trying to say in a roundabout way. And my thought, it doesn't say it in the most humble manner. So I need your help. As you listen to this, listen closely because it speaks to you. It speaks to me. It's not so much me that's speaking, but the spirit in which I was allowed to write this. And it reads, Awaken the dreamer. Do not talk to me of dreaming. It's been a long time since I slept. I am fully awake with vision, enough to know why Jesus wept. I have walked the valley of hopelessness. I have climbed mountains of despair. I know what it means to be lost in darkness, bowing to and for everything except for prayer. Don't talk to me of dreaming, of hope unfulfilled and destiny unkept. I too have drunk from the cup of bitterness, and because I love you so, I too wept. If I could, but somehow shake you in the past, I know you would awake. See, you've been dreaming far too long. Envision your dreams, make them reality. For the night itself is against you. You must see your vision today. Because when darkness comes, even dreamers lose their way. We've all lost some things, to include some sleep along the way. We were frustrated by our dreams, the ignorance of darkness clouding our day. Brothers, it's time out for dreaming. Just as Martin Today is the day. Wake up, you sleeping giant. Wake up, it's time you found your way. Don't close your eyes talking about a dream. For if ever there was a man of vision, it was Martin Luther King. I say to you, wake up, my brothers, wake up. The day the prophet saw is near. Jesus said, I have overcome the world. Martin said, I have seen the promised land. I say to you, my dazed brothers, wake up. The day of promise is at hand. It's time we stood up in the valley and beheld the glorious light of day. See, I have seen the mountaintop, only I was looking from the shadow of death. I know the way, the truth, and the life. The drum major made it all so bright. I'm marching forward from darkness to light. I too am a drum major, in stride and in step, listening to the inner drums within myself. I know, I know what I know, and I'm not dreaming anymore. See, I have vision enough to share my light with the world as a whole. And I think that was the light that represented by the word that when Jesus came, there was a light that sprung up in the darkness. That as Martin went about, there was a light that sprung up. And it's that light that we carry within us. And as I wrote this poem, that light wasn't able to shine because I was not willing to let it shine. I was fearful of the greatness that might be associated with that this poem. I was worried about someone saying, "Who does he think he is?" But just as Dr. King in his speaking, if you say something enough, you'll begin to believe it. And when you believe it, then it belongs to you. And when it belongs to you, that's who you are. I would love to say, prior to writing this poem or getting the thought of what a vision was, I love the thought of the dream. But a dream will stay just that. If we are challenged with envisioning the dream, that means this gets that much closer to reality. But if we only see it as a dream, as Dr. King's dream, then somehow we may see ourselves as being exempt. Many of us weren't there then, and Dr. King isn't here now. And if you think of it in a spiritual sense, many of us are here now, challenged with going, preaching, teaching a word that Jesus isn't here now to teach. The same way that we are inspired by that word to the point that we can profess to have a certain religion, we should be just as motivated by that dream that we can uh, turn it into a vision and work toward living that day out because indeed we are far from it. It wasn't so long ago that we were marching in the streets because of a young man that was killed, or I wouldn't say young man, but a brother that was killed by the police. An issue that really died out due to time. And we don't know what the conclusion of it was, but we need to be more in tune with what Dr. King represented. And if anything you take from this is this: when he made reference to the dream, that dream for him was just that. But if ever that dream is going to come true, it has to become a vision for somebody. Why not you and I? I'm going to leave you with that thought. It's time we envision the dream. That's not to say that others have not. There's just certain things that are going to be done by certain people at certain points in time. And maybe we are that people. Maybe we are, and I won't use the term generation to imply age, but within our time frame. Maybe this is that generation that's going to do some things different. Leave you with this thought. I don't have the quote before me, but it was one made by Frederick Douglass. And Frederick Douglass was a voice that was very vocal in his time. He even did a newspaper. And one of the things that Frederick Douglass said, it was pertaining to these United States and this slavery and this system of the past. He said, to think that we would ever die out or be driven out is absurd. And he went on to say, we will go with this people either as a testimony against them or in their favor. Powerful words. But remember this, when they challenged Jesus about what he was doing and they wanted to judge him, he made a point and he said that it is your children that will judge you. It's our children that will judge us. It's time out for sleeping. When Jesus finally made up his mind, he told his disciples, arise, we must be going. And I say to you all, arise. I'm Jamie Eatman, and that OTR stands for I am on the rise. And I pray you are as well. Peace and blessings be unto you.